I was exposed to pornography, and this exposure, which led to curiosity and confusion, which led to interest, and then eventually this desire and this habit of continuing to view it just overtook my life. I realized, wait, this is a bigger problem than I thought it was. And then going into college, wait, this is a way bigger problem than I thought it was. The enemy wants to keep us silent and isolated and stuck in shame and pretending like nothing is going on behind the scenes. Many of us are living in a counterfeit way of life. We think that it's going to give us life, but it's actually taking life from us. We think that it's serving us, but we're actually enslaved to it. It requires work, but the beautiful thing is that Christ shares the burden with us. Living a disciplined life is key to living a life of freedom.
They need to realize that discipline is what gives you the freedom. You're listening to the Visibly Fit Podcast. Hey, I'm your host, Wendie Pett. And every week, I'll give you holistic, practical solutions for everyday issues related to nutrition, healing, functional fitness, and behavior modifications. As a naturopath, fitness expert, and wellness coach for over 20 years, my goal is to empower you to reach for greater health and to rise up to your next level of living in mind, body, and spirit. You were created with greatness in mind. It's time to own it. Are you with me? Then let's dive in. Are you living in shame, guilt, condemnation? Do you feel those oppressive feelings often? Well, you're going to want to tune in to this episode of the Visibly Fit Podcast because I have an incredible guest on with me today who's going to share some insight and talk about a book that she wrote called You Can Be Free. Hello, I am your host, Wendie Pett, and I love spending this time with you. Thanks for tuning in. You know, being visibly fit is about being fit mind, body, spirit, emotions. And if we are in a kind of oppressed state of being because of maybe a way in which we are choosing to live, and we just need to break free of our sin, quite frankly, then it's not living, right? It's not what God has called us to. And so I want to encourage you to really tune in and listen because my guest today, Kirby Kelly, shares with us just her incredible wisdom. She is young, she's bright, she's intelligent, and she is just led by the Spirit, by the Holy Spirit. And you will, I think, be refreshed by hearing from her and hearing her story. She is an influencer on all kinds of social media platforms, including having, 170,000 subscribers on YouTube. She's big on TikTok and Instagram and all those things. And she has a podcast herself called Bought Plus Beloved. And that is a podcast that she shares weekly that encourages and inspires and teaches people the truth of the Bible and how to cultivate a relationship with Jesus. And so she has just a passion. She has a passion for teaching God's truth everywhere she goes, whether it's on stage or in front of a camera or just in front of a few friends or on her social media platforms. She's all about sharing God's truth. And again, she's got an incredible story. She is an overcomer. She has overcome an addiction herself that you might be surprised to hear about. So listen in, tune in, and realize that, wow, we are created to be overcomers and we don't have to stay stuck in our muck. She is from Dallas, Texas. So I love that she's a Texas girl. I grew up not too far away. And she graduated with honors from DBU, Dallas Baptist University, and she has a master's in theology. She is a communications minor, communications and a minor in biblical studies, And since high school, Kirby has been steadfast. She's been a steadfast believer, and she began shaping the world through ministry on her social media since fully committing her life to Christ at age 14. So she has been building up her social media platforms for quite some time. She's on a mission, and she's using those platforms wisely. So enjoy the show. Well, hello, Kirby Kelly. Welcome to the Visibly Fit Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, this is very fun. So Visibly Fit is a health podcast. It's about being healthy mind, body, spirit, emotions. And so I'm bringing you in because, first of all, you've written a new book called You Can Be Free,
Yes.
Overcoming Temptation and Habitual Sin by the Power and the Promises of the Gospel. And so much of our health is related to how we feel about who we are in our heart, like our identity in Christ, and also our mental health and well-being. So I wanted to bring you in, first of all, to say kudos to you, excited for your new book, but just for you to share from your heart, because you have quite a testimony yourself of what you've overcome. And so I think I'd like to go there first, and then we'll weave into some other things with the book. So let's share a little bit about your story.
Yeah, definitely. Well, for those of y'all who do know who I am or don't know who I am, my name's Kirby Kelly. I'm from Dallas, Texas. I'm 27 years old, and I wrote a book called You Can Be Free. And in my book, I talk about overcoming temptation, overcoming habitual sin, overcoming shame, overcoming the lies of the enemy, and what it looks like to truly walk in freedom and fullness in relationship with the Lord. And the reason why I wrote this book and like specifically this topic is because this was something that I just wrestled with for so long, was truly stuck in for so long, this cycle of sin, not knowing how to breaking free from it, and honestly like feeling hopeless and helpless that I couldn't get free. Like maybe I could be free in all these other areas in my life in regards to God redeeming these areas, restoring these areas, completely removing desires and old ways of living in certain areas. But there were some areas of my life where those patterns, those habits, those mindsets, those attitudes and actions, and the shame that came with it just clung close, and I couldn't seem to shake off by my own effort, by my best attempts. And so eventually,
you're human? Is that what you're saying?
Can you believe it? Right? I literally have a whole chapter about that, like where it's like, no, you're human, and we need to understand that.
Yeah.
But the habitual sin that I was stuck in, just to like rip off the Band-Aid.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that anyway.
We're going to just go there because why not? Literally in the first chapter. When I was 7 years old, and again when I was 10 years old, I was exposed to pornography, and this exposure, which led to curiosity and confusion, which led to interest, and then eventually this desire and this habit of continuing to view it just overtook my life. It was wrong. I knew I shouldn't be viewing this thing, but it wasn't until I was 14 years old, when I gave my life to Jesus, that I truly understood, oh wait, there's a level of conviction here, that this isn't just something I shouldn't be doing, but this is something that's not just a sin against myself, but against a holy God. I shouldn't be viewing this stuff. It goes outside his will and his order. But how come I still have this innate and insatiable desire and draw to do this thing that I know I shouldn't be doing, that isn't serving me, that's actually stealing and taking away from me? Yeah. And there were so many lies, I believe, so much shame that I had, that just kept me in that cycle, kept me in that bondage. And it wasn't until I got to college that I finally began to actually walk out real freedom, not just a week of freedom, not just a month of freedom, but I'm talking about freedom,
Delivered.
freedom, deliverance. Exactly. Yeah. And so the book is for that person who's struggling with that today and wants to see that freedom for their life.
So just in awe and proud of you. Like, I don't know you, but I'm proud of you because, first of all, I don't know that too many people think females get attached and addicted to pornography.
Yep.
Right? And yeah, it's a real deal. So the fact that you're coming clean with that and you're sharing will allow others to not feel that aloneness within their suffering, right? Yeah. Because it doesn't have to be that way. You can be delivered from it. You are have experienced that yourself, the power of Jesus and just his healing power. But it is a real thing. And so I was, just recently the Surgeon General declared that they're going to put a warning label on social media, right? Oh, wow. Which I was for mental health aspects. And I thought, well, finally, it's about time. But that's how some of that stuff gets leaked in. And I'm not saying that all social media is bad, none of that, right? Yeah. But the pornography part of it can happen by accident. Just like you mentioned, you were young, you didn't know. It was probably an accidental situation. How did that happen? Do you remember?
Yeah, so when I was 4 years old, I remember I was looking for someone, a specific person, because I needed help with something, and I walked in on them watching it. And they didn't know that I walked in the room and I saw it. You know, I was little, I was literally 4 years old. And I remember just like seeing what they were watching, and it was just I was completely enamored by it because I didn't understand what was going on. I was trying to make sense of it. And then when I
And
was
this was
7
an
years old,
adult in your life?
yes, this was
That,
an adult in my life. And then
mhm.
when I was 7 years old, I was looking through someone's desk. I was like looking for something. I forget what, but someone sent me to go like look for something. And I came across that adult's stack of pornographic magazines. And so
Mhm.
again, it was almost like this familiarity. Like, wait, I feel like I've seen some of this before. And so there was this interest, this curiosity. I was looking at it. And then, like I mentioned, when I was 10 years old, I think that was kind of like the hammer to the nail, like that really nailed everything into place in my life regarding this struggle. Because I was 10 years old, I went over to a friend's house for a sleepover. She was also 10 years old. We were both in 5th grade. There was another girl there too. And she told us that she wanted to show us this website that her brother showed her,
Oh
which in and
boy.
of itself is very problematic to think about, that her
Mhm.
brother was the one who exposed her to this. But
Mhm.
nonetheless, she exposed me to it, and she showed me for the first time where I could get access, what I could look up, how to view it, how to clear my search history. Like, she taught me literally everything. And
Mm.
I don't know if she realized what she was doing in that moment. If anything, I bet she was just relaying the information to me that was relayed to her, of this is what this is what this process looks like. But it became such a stronghold in my life. I didn't even realize it until, like I said, I got saved, and it's, wait, this is a bigger problem than I thought it was. And then going into college, wait, this is a way bigger problem than I thought it was. That didn't just start when I was a teenager, where I was finally like aware that this wasn't a good thing or a godly thing at that.
Yeah.
But this was something that began, that seed was planted when I was 4 years old, and was just
Mm.
completely traumatic to my life,
As the
destructive to my
enemy
life.
comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and he does
That.
it by those kinds of things, right? And it just
Mhm.
is a little, and then it continues to grow, and you
Mhm.
don't realize the magnitude of it until you become maybe hyper sexual, or you just
Mhm.
there's just this addiction, the chemical release in the brain of the addiction. And
Yeah.
so I had no idea actually we were going to be talking about this, because I did not, I didn't know that that was the sin that you were trapped in. And
Surprise.
no,
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we're talking about this, because I actually have someone else coming on the show that is highly involved in pornography. And I'm going to be sharing about, yeah, from a medical
Wow.
standpoint. So this is going to be a great
Wow.
piggyback show. So anyway, I'm just proud of you for speaking out,
Thank you.
because a lot of people suffer again in silence. And so the
Yeah.
church, how did they react when you went to someone for help? How was that situation?
Yeah. So, kind of like what you said, I was suffering in silence for years, isolation for years, well over a decade. I was struggling with
Mm.
this
And how did
habitual
that
sin.
affect you really quickly? How did that
Mhm.
affect you with school, with your social circle? How did that
Mhm.
affect you with your family?
Honestly, I was just really good at keeping things secret and separate and hidden. Now,
Mm.
just for a little bit of context, my family life, my father and my mom, they were both addicts. So they both struggled with alcoholism at different points in my life.
Mm.
And I was kind of ingrained from a really early age, hey, like, this is something that you keep secret. Nobody can know about their addiction. Nobody can know about dad's addiction. Nobody can know about mom's addiction.
Right.
And
Addiction
so,
bad.
exactly. So then when it came to my own struggle, which I didn't realize at the time was addiction, it was an addictive pattern and behavior in my life. I was continuing to go to this thing and I could not stop. It was an addiction.
Mm.
For me, it was, I need to keep this thing hidden. I need to keep it silent and secret. It didn't affect my school life in terms of my grades. It didn't affect my social circles in terms of my friends, but there was just always this weight of shame and this burden of secrecy, because
Yeah.
keeping things secret, keeping things not just locked in the closet, but you're the one that's like barricading the closet, like your arms start to shake. You get tired. You start to panic and freak out. And I didn't go to anybody in my church and confess to them, because as a young woman who was struggling with a porn addiction, who am I going to tell? My male youth pastor? I don't think he would
Right.
have judged me. Truly, I genuinely don't think he would have judged me. I really believe that he would have met me with grace and compassion, because
Yeah.
that's who he was. He knows the truth and he knows the Lord. Like, I know he would have met me with that. But at that point in time, because of the lies of the enemy, I just was so completely convinced that nobody can find out about this, because then I'm a hypocrite of a Christian, then I'm disgusting, then I'm worthless, then I am everything that I think that I am.
Oh my
The
gosh.
ways
Like,
that I'm viewing and judging myself, it will all just be confirmed in everybody else. And I was so afraid of that, especially as a people pleaser growing up, chronic people
that right
pleaser.
there, Kirby, will so preach. Like, people are, whether you're addicted to pornography, food,
Yeah.
unhealthy
Shopping
foods,
addiction,
shopping,
gambling.
social media, gambling, all of it. Whatever you're addicted to, there's the stigma of that shame, blame, condemnation, ickiness. And that's really what your message is about, that you can be free of that. And so let's talk a little bit about those that are feeling hopeless, that are feeling trapped, that their arms are tired from holding up that barricade. What would you tell them to do today to change the trajectory of their life, where they can be free and let their arms down and once and for all be free?
Totally. Well, so the way that I structure my book, it's a battle plan, and it builds step by step by step by step. So you don't have to be struggling with the very thing that I was struggling with, because everybody is wired different. We all have a lean towards something. And this battle plan is very practical and biblical on what we can actually do. Because it's one thing to be like, you can be free and just pray about it and do better. Because I guarantee all of us have tried that. And it's like,
Right.
well,
Didn't
nothing's
work.
changing, right? So I provide a practical battle plan that goes with each chapter. And I think the first chapter, or not the first chapter, the first step in the battle plan is one of the most vital steps, and it is confession. And you mentioned that earlier. Well, Kirby, who did you confess to? And for me, I didn't confess to anybody until I got to college, my freshman year at DBU, Dallas Baptist University, and I was in a Christian sorority. And it was really cool because we had this camping trip where we did an activity where we anonymously filled out a survey with different statements of things that we were struggling with. Like, I struggle with a porn addiction. Yes or no, true or false. I use drugs to numb my pain. I'm sleeping with my boyfriend. Like, it was just like every statement you could think of. It was a long list, and we all anonymously filled out a survey, crumbled it up, threw it across the room, picked up a random girl's note, and we would stand in place of her if she circled yes. We went by statement by statement. And so when it got to that statement, I struggle with watching pornography, I was expecting of like the 50-something girls in the room for one girl to stand up representing me. That one person circled yes. But to my surprise, not only did I see that the paper that I had grabbed of a different girl, she had circled yes, but half of the room stood up. Like at least 25 women stood up. And then following that activity, different members of the sorority stood up, and they talked about areas where they once struggled and found freedom, and really encouraged us, hey, like, confess. This is a community where we want to walk alongside each other, and we want to walk out freedom together and relationship with Jesus together. And one of the girls who stood up and spoke talked about how she overcame and found freedom from her pornography addiction. And in her going first, that not only gave me hope, but I think that was just like the final thing that pushed me to knocking on her door and going over to her apartment and crying on her couch, and finally, for the first time since I was 4 years old, finally confessing that this was something that was affecting my life. And I know that keep us silent and isolated and stuck in shame and pretending like nothing is going on behind the scenes. But if we can actually take that first step, that uncomfortable step of finding someone who knows the gospel, who loves Jesus, who has walked out freedom in their life, and we can find and pray for that one person to come into our life, and we can confess to them, I think it's going to be more surprising for people than they could ever expect. That it is actually a very liberating thing and not a shameful thing to bring the things that are in the dark into the light, so you can begin to heal.
Kirby, because I think it takes courage
Mm-hmm.
to confess, right?
Yeah.
And so for someone to go before you to already have walked in those shoes to
Yeah.
give you that hope and to see the breakthrough on the other side, that's
Mm-hmm.
why it's powerful that we always share our story.
Yeah.
Because God gets the glory in it, right? We know that, but it's like, okay, if we keep it all hidden and dark and what you were trained to do
Mm-hmm.
when you were young, then the enemy can keep talking the talk and in your head and get to
Exactly.
you, as opposed to shining God's bright light on it, and then all of a sudden it's exposed and it doesn't own you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the cool thing. And so I love that you are on a mission to help women, especially,
Mm-hmm.
break free of the ownership of sin.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so we don't have to live in fear and shame and hopelessness. God really does want his best for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, with that said, I love that it's a battle plan, because
Mm-hmm.
it is a battle.
Yeah.
We're facing, like, spiritual battle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then even with the way the world is right now, and you see even on social media or whatever, if you have comparison-itis and you
Mm-hmm.
see other people, then it feels like it's a battle because everyone's doing it, or it's
Exactly.
not that big a deal because so-and-so does it. And so let's
Mm-hmm.
talk on those terms, because you are, you're in your 20s, late 20s?
Yeah, I'm 27.
27. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
goodness, to be 27 again. So, so 27, and you are so wise, and you're so on this mission to help women get free. You know, it's been a while since you have started your social media, and
Mm-hmm.
you've had this passion. Let's talk a little bit about that passion, because you were raised in a home of addicts.
Mm-hmm.
And, did this help you kind of get through some of that by putting your energy into, obviously, God's truth, and to share with others, and make this kind of a passion to help others along their way?
Yeah, I don't think I ever expected even like this part of my story to be one, just out in the open in the public for everybody to know, but two, the kind of the foundation of my book, sharing my background of having habitual sin, but also talking about my parents' addiction, because again, that was something that was so quiet and silent for so many years. And I talk about it in a way, even in my book, I detail a little bit about it. And I want to honor my parents. I love my
Sure.
parents, and I recognize their humanity and how literally anybody can struggle with that. Anybody can
Yeah.
struggle with anything because of the way that we're wired. I mean, you even talked about just the science behind it. I have a whole chapter regarding the science behind the struggle, dopamine, and having automatic habits and all those things, and how God wired us in a way to be able to have habits and to be able to have disciplines and desires and all these things. But because of the world we live in and the culture we live in and the deception of the enemy and the flesh, even giving into those fleshly desires outside of God's will and order, we can wire ourselves to live in a way that we were not meant to live. There's always going to be a counterfeit to whatever the real's are living in, a counterfeit way of life. We think that it's going to give us life, but it's actually taking life from us. We think that it's serving us, but we're actually enslaved to it. I think as I've opened up more and more about it, and as I've just seen or really reflected more on my parents' lives as addicts and the areas where they saw freedom or the areas where there was relapse and there was struggle, I think it's just given me, one, more empathy for other people, but even just grace for myself, because I think it's really easy for me as an individual, just me talking here, to show love and grace and compassion for everybody out there. But when it comes to me and me struggling, it's so easy to beat myself up. It's like, God, you don't have to show me your wrath. Like, I'll punish myself. Like, I will trust me. Like, I will take care of that department of things. And I think that's just another thing that I feel so called with anybody out there who's struggling, is to yes, I'm going to speak the truth in love. Like, you need to stop entertaining your sin. Like, we serve and we love a holy God who has called us to be a holy and set apart people.
Right.
But we need to understand our humanity, why we do what we don't want to do, how he has wired us, and how it can be redeemed in him, and that we don't need to demonize ourselves. We need to put the enemy in his place and start walking out newness, start walking out redemption, and have grace for ourselves as well.
Through that
You know, like,
process. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. You know, a lot of my patients are in their late 50s or even 60s, right? And they're still struggling with so much of that shame and guilt and condemnation that
Yeah.
maybe happened when they were 4 years old. So it's just really heartbreaking to see someone that lives their life into their, older years, and they're still not free from that yet. And so it's a choice, number one, but it also takes an intentional surrender, right?
100%.
Yeah. So you intentionally surrendered. It helped at the sorority to have some others that have gone before you. Your parents, I believe I read that they're no longer with us. Is that correct?
Yeah, my dad passed away when I was 10 years old because of his addiction.
Wow.
And then when last year my mom passed away, there was a lot of like health complications that went with that, but because of her addiction, that obviously didn't help her body to be able to like survive. So that eventually led to her passing away. That was a big contributor to her passing away. So
The accumulation,
unfortunately, they're both not here.
The breakdown of our bodies. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Oh, thank
you. And it's you and your brother. Are you the oldest?
No, I'm the youngest, but we're like a year and a half apart. But my older brother, he has autism, so I feel like in a way it was kind of like the first child hat was passed to me in terms of just responsibility, taking care of my mom because my parents were divorced, taking care of my mom when she was having, an addiction spell, and really just living out codependency kind of in a way as well, with taking care of her, making sure all of her needs were met, but in a way neglecting my own. So I think also
you had to grow up quick.
Yes. So I think also like getting to college, it was like, well, now I can actually, that there's like this boundary and this separation here. Now I can actually heal and work on the things that I need to work on regarding my relationship with my mom, regarding my relationship with myself and my sin and my struggles. And it took a lot of time, and I'm still even unpacking a lot of those things, but I'm healthier today, mentally, physically, emotionally, than I was all those years back then, because I surrendered, because I was willing to heal, because I was willing to go and do the hard work of saying no to sin, of setting up boundaries, of living life the way that Christ calls us to in every avenue and aspect of our life at work. But the beautiful thing is that Christ shares the burden with us. He the yoke alongside with us in what he calls us to do and to live a life of fullness, the life that he promises us in John 10:10.
So good, Kirby. Oh my goodness, you're so wise for your years. Oh my gosh. If I knew all the things that you do at your age, at my age, oh my gosh. Back then,
well,
I'd probably have a different story. But
yeah, I was going to say part of it too is that, because I gave my life to Jesus when I was 14, and that's when my mom relapsed for the first time in a long time.
Interesting.
And truly, I mean, the enemy's timing is so perfect, right? But I had to lean on the Lord in that season of my life. It's like, what am I going to do? One, I want to know Jesus, but I have to lean on him in this season and navigate this season of life where things are just out of control, out of my control. And I think the trauma and just pressing into the Lord, it brings about wisdom too.
Absolutely. So did you go through a period of resentment, anger? How did you get to a place of forgiveness? Not just maybe to God, but to yourself, to your parents? Like, tell me a little bit about the forgiveness piece, because I always talk about how fitness and health, the key to that is forgiveness. That is the F word, forgiveness.
Yeah. I love that. The F word. That's so good.
It gets people's attention.
That's perfect. Honestly, that's a good hook. I think when it came to, so my dad passed away, like I said, when I was 10 years old. I became a Christian when I was 14 years old. And that's when all of those words that you mentioned, forgiveness, redemption, reconciliation, all of these like big church words and Christian words, I started really like hearing and understanding for the first time. So when my mom relapsed, I think genuinely I didn't have any hatred towards her. I had anger towards her, rightfully so, because it's like, well, you're supposed to be the parent in this situation, and anger towards my father as well. But
Sure.
but truly, I did actively and still do forgive them for the decisions that they made in their life. Like I forgave my dad a long time ago, just in my own heart, because I was so young, didn't get to have a mature understanding now as an adult conversation with him. But from a young age, I forgave him for everything that he did. And my mom, I actively, whenever she would act out of character, when she was not sober minded, and she would come to me afterwards, after the alcohol was out of her system, and she would just apologize and apologize, and I could just see that there was so much shame in her and self-hatred that she had, that she was continuing to fall into this addiction. And I think because I had just met the Lord and was so radically changed by God in that way, I just couldn't help, truly, not out of obligation, but just truly my heart posture. I forgave her for
It's beautiful.
doing that, knowing like her life, knowing what she went through, knowing just how she viewed herself, knowing now how God viewed her, because I knew how God viewed me. Like, it was such a beautiful opportunity to share the gospel with her time and 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 time again, because it happened more than once. But it was
And did she receive Jesus?
I was going to say, the beautiful thing is that out of that, even though she wasn't completely delivered from her addiction, because that was still something that she had to surrender,
Sure.
she did come to know Jesus through that, and she
That's
gave her
awesome.
life to the Lord. And it was really beautiful how, in just showing up, being obedient, being like Christ, my mom came to know the gospel through my actions, through my words, through my deeds, and began to just ask questions about Jesus. And I especially think, like, in her generation, like growing up, there was so much shame in the church culture, and God is mad at you and he's angry at you, just this narrative. uh and I think because of that, it was so easy for her to view herself in that way. And it was really cool to meet her and show her, yes, God is a righteous God. Like, he has righteous anger and wrath, but because of Jesus, he loves you. God is love. Like, he genuinely loves you, meets you with his mercy and his grace, and you get to fully receive that. So it was really cool to see that there was this softening of her heart towards God, and even towards herself, by the end of her life, which was beautiful. For me, though, it was really easy for me, in my own sin, to view myself with this idea of, well, but I'm not forgiven in this area, but I'm still struggling here. And that's something that I had to work on as well within myself, is realizing, wait, God truly loves me, truly forgives me, wants to empower me to live a life of freedom. I can only do it with him. And that was something that I had to eventually believe and walk in myself.
That's it. It's walking out in that authority that he has given us, right? And so many times, because of the sin, it keeps us held back and keeps us shrinking. And that's, again, what the enemy wants us to do, because he knows what God has called us to do and the power that's behind that. And so the more we can just be set free, and you can be free. That is the title of your book. You can be free. But free, the more you can rise up to all that God has called you to do, and the impact, the ripple effect is just, it's amazing. And that's what the enemy is afraid of. It's not just you or me, the individual. It's the ripple effect of stepping into our calling. Totally. And so I just want to say, well done, good and faithful servant, Kirby, because it is work. It is work. And so if it were easy, everybody would be, holier than thou and walking the straight and narrow. It's not, quote unquote, easy, but it gets easier. It's just different than maybe what we've been doing. It's
Yeah.
going against the sin and seeing sin further and further away, and then walking in the ways he has for us. So you highlight the importance of spiritual disciplines in your book. How does this relate to the main topic of your book on freedom and habitual sin?
Yes. So I have a whole chapter about godly disciplines. Living a disciplined life is key to living a life of freedom. Components to it. I talk about confession. I talk about really knowing what the truth is in a world full of lies. Like knowing who God is, knowing who we are, knowing who the enemy is. But towards the end of the book, I break down, okay, practicals, we need to live a life of godly discipline. And if we're
Hold
just
up,
talking,
Kirby, real quick. A lot of times people equate freedom with no discipline. That connect, that they need to realize that discipline is what gives you the freedom. Yeah.
Exactly.
So keep going.
Totally. I totally agree with that statement. Well, because it's like, if you're not living within the boundaries that God has given you, and if you're not living within the order and the instruction that he gives you, you're going to be living a life of lawlessness. Like, truly, there is true freedom in what the Lord asks of us, or what he requires of us, because truthfully, he has our best interest in mind. Like, if we want to live a life of peace, of protection, of joy, of freedom, of fullness, it's going to fall within his boundaries. It's going to fall within his commands and the disciplines that maintain living within that way of life. Like, life requires discipline, even to like the smallest degree, to see progress, to see anything.
With your health, your well-being, all of it.
100%. And so about the same time that I was writing the book, I did the 75 hard challenge, if you've ever heard of that. So I did that like a year or two ago. I think it was last year, actually. Yeah. Last year. And I learned a lot about
those cold showers.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, I did at that point, working out twice a day. Oh my gosh. In Texas, it's hot outside. I'm ready for real. But I learned so much, not only about like discipline in the physical sense of this challenge of like sticking to the diet that I had and working out 2 times a day and cutting out certain things, like everything that this challenge required of me. And it was really hard. It was really hard, especially those first like 2-3 weeks, to be disciplined in this like regimen that I had, this little regime that I had. But it wasn't until probably like week 4 or week 5 that I began to actually see the progress in my life. And I think that's something that a lot of us need to really hold on to when it comes to living a life of discipline, is that with time, you're going to look back and see the progress and have perspective about these decisions that you are making daily, that they truly are paying off, that they truly are worth it. I mean, with this challenge, you're supposed to take a picture of yourself every single day. Now, if you're looking at yourself in the mirror every single day, you're just going to be seeing the same thing. But when I was looking at my day 50, my day 75 picture compared to my day 1 picture, it was a completely different person.
You were high-fiving yourself all over the place.
Yes. I'm thinking about doing it again, just because maybe 75 soft, 75 hard was hard. But truthfully, showing up and being disciplined in that way, it really, I think God really spoke to me in that when it came to writing my chapter on godly disciplines, because in the same way that when we commit to going to the gym or sticking to the diet or doing the thing that will make us healthier physically.
It's all connected.
It's all connected. Like, we see this spiritually when we get in God's word. It's not just about being an A+ Christian, getting into God's word and showing up to church and singing all the same songs. No, 1, it brings us into deeper intimacy with God. But 2, it exercises like that spiritual muscle that makes us strong when it comes to resisting the enemy and running the race that we're called to run. There's so much language like that in the Bible, where it's this endurance, this physical, this, and just knowing the time, like the Olympics and Paul, just knowing the region, like this was all like a great big metaphor for these people, like this physical discipline we need to have in our spiritual practice, because just as we'll see results when we go to the gym or do whatever, we're going to see results when it comes to, like I said, resisting the enemy, fleeing from temptation, moving forward where God calls us to move forward, even when it's hard, even when there's opposition. we have to show up daily, because those daily disciplines eventually develop into desires. You might not want to get up early and read your Bible. You might not want to go to the gym every single day. But as you practice that discipline,
becomes sticky.
It becomes sticky. You see the results, you see the progress, you have the perspective, and there's this desire that gets born within you of, wait, this is way better for me than what I was doing or what I wasn't doing. And now I want to keep doing this thing, having this perspective now. It becomes a desire over time. So commit. Like, truly, it's hard, but we have to show up. We have to commit. We have to do the things that God is asking us to do, knowing that truly it will serve us way better than anything outside of God's order will serve us, because it doesn't serve us. It takes away from us. Anything that's outside of God, that's a counterfeit. It's not going to serve you. It's going to steal from you. So godly discipline truly leads to a life of freedom. I think it goes hand in hand. And if we can make time to know God's truth, get in God's word, understand that his will and way is way better than anything that we could do, I think we're going to just see a new desire within our lives to live a life and lead a life of freedom.
You're absolutely right. I love it. I love everything that you stand for, Kirby. And thank you for just being a powerhouse, a voice of truth, of God's truth, and sharing your just incredible story, because it's allowing others the freedom to come forth and to know that they too can be free. And so if you're listening, make sure you check out Kirby's book, You Can Be Free, Overcoming Temptation and Habitual Sin by the Power and Promises of the Gospel. And they can get that at your website, or what's the best way?
Yeah, it's available everywhere. You can go on Amazon, Audible, Barnes & Noble, everywhere books are sold.
Perfect. Well, go there, get that book, and you will be empowered. God bless you, Kirby, and I hope to meet you someday in person in my home state of Texas.
Yes.
All right. Take care. God bless. Well, I sure hope you enjoyed this episode of the Visibly Fit Podcast. Kirby Kelly is just a delight. I just find her absolutely adorable, and I hope you enjoyed her message, and that you go get her book called You Can Be Free, Overcoming Temptation and Habitual Sin by the Power and Promises of the Gospel. You can get that on her website, or anywhere that books are sold. You can find this book. Make sure you get it, support her, and I know it will encourage you and help you from self-sabotage and self-destruction. So get that battle plan today. And also, if you are looking for a battle plan of your own to get healthy and well, mind, body, spirit, emotions, go to getvisiblyfit.com and check out my 7-week program. I'm here to assist you through and through. And as a naturopath, I want to give you the most natural ways and forms to heal your body as God intended. He did intend for you to live in a healthy body. It is the vehicle that gets you from here to there, but also it allows you to be more equipped with sharing his truth and sharing his love and having that energy to do what he's called you to do. So go to getvisiblyfit.com. Let's get you healthy and well, get off medications. Maybe you're dealing with some dis-ease in your body. Go there. Let's get started today. I've got testimonial after testimonial that will inspire and encourage you and hopefully get you to say, yes, I am ready to do this. So let's do this together. I'm here to walk your hand and teach you through the process. So go to getvisiblyfit.com and we'll go from there. All right. God bless you. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Visibly Fit, and we will catch you next week. Take care. Well, that's a wrap for today's show. So thank you so much for tuning in. I love spending this time with you. To learn more and get more free resources, just head on over to wendiepett.com. And thank you in advance for sharing this episode and this podcast, following and subscribing not only to this podcast, but finding me on social media, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you are. I'm probably there too. Until next week and our next podcast time together, make it a visibly fit day.